Hello and welcome. I'm Liz Booker, literary aviatrix, with another installment of my leadership and development interview series with the author of two books that feature women in aviation. So Others May Live, Coast Guard Rescue Swimmers Saving Lives and Defying Death, and Changing the Rules of Engagement, Inspiring Stories of Courage and Leadership from Women in the Military. Fewer than 10% of pilots and aircraft mechanics are women. These are their stories of tenacity, adventure, and courage. Stories with the power to inspire, heal, and connect. Welcome to the literary aviatrix community, where we leverage the power of story to build and celebrate our community and inspire the next generation of aviation. Captain Martha LaGuardia-Kotite, welcome.
Thank you, Liz. I've been so looking forward to this, and it's such a delight to see you and be on your show. Thank you.
No, I'm so excited about this, and you know why, and that will reveal itself soon. But let's get started with your books. I know that I mentioned two in my introduction that feature women in aviation, but you actually have three in print. If you don't mind, could you give us a synopsis of all three?
Oh, I'd be delighted. My first book that I wrote is called So Others May Live, Coast Guard Rescue Swimmers Saving Lives, Defying Death. And it's this collection of legendary, extraordinary heroes and a team of people that work together in a helicopter to do these crazy rescues. And they're legit because they helped me pick out which stories should be in the book, the people that do this business. My second book, which was inspired by a speaking event from the first book, is called Changing the Rules of Engagement, Inspiring Stories of Courage and Leadership from Women in the Military. It's all services in the United States. It's about trailblazing women that served in the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Air Force, who am I forgetting? The Army, all ranks, all services, showcasing these amazing women who created a culture of empowerment and paved the way for the rest of us.
And on the cover of that book is now a retired Colonel Nicole Malachowski, who was our first female Thunderbird demonstration pilot. Yep.
Yes, and I loved talking with her. She was an amazing person to get some lessons from, and every woman in that book inspired me as well. That's awesome. Then my third book was inspired by an event, the retirement ceremony of the rescue swimmer featured in chapter 3, Jeff Tunks, who's a legend, said, "Martha, come to my retirement." And of course, I shared his story at the retirement. It was such an honor. And then at the end of the retirement ceremony, as most services do, there's a presentation of the United States flag. And those words are read from the most junior person in a lineup of people in formal dress, with a flag starting at the junior person, a hand salute, and flag is passed along the line to the retiree. And the words of which are the front end of my book, the book is called My Name is Old Glory, are in this book, and it's a tribute to the power and passion of our flag and what it means to us, to people who serve. And the words at the front end are written by Howard Schnauber, who was a World War II Marine. So I'm grateful for the blessings of that estate to allow me to use his words in my book, including other features in the back end with great pictures. It's a great gift book. It's a great book for people that want to celebrate why our country is so amazing.
Oh my gosh, all of these books are so incredible, and we're so lucky to have you to be the one to write them and publish them. But you have a story of your own, and so let's talk a little bit about that. I will just confess that I've been a huge fangirl of yours since I'm going to say 1996 was the first time that I remember meeting you. And in the military, just by the way that it works, is if you're a senior and you're in the spotlight, junior people may know who you are, but that doesn't mean that you always know who they are. And I know that you couldn't possibly have known that about me, but we have been in touch over the years. So tell us your story.
Oh, wow. Well, and I must say the roles have been reversed because I'm a huge fangirl of you
Oh, thank you.
and all that you have done to elevate stories and people.
Yeah,
So thank you for all that you do.
that's my pleasure.
My story, I'll try to keep it short and sweet, I guess, is I joined the Coast Guard and was honored to do so from growing up in a small fishing village known as the world's luckiest fishing village. Ready for the name of it?
Yes.
Destin, Florida. So Destin, Florida is where we have a Coast Guard station. And I always say, and I cherish the moment that I got to meet the heart of the Coast Guard at Station Destin.
Oh,
And seeing the people there and how they work together, it felt so great and felt so different from the other services. And I just wanted to be a part of it, to be a part of the missions, saving lives, protecting the environment. And of course, our service has grown and many more missions have followed in the days that have passed since I accepted my appointment at Station Destin to go to the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. And so, yes, I did go to the academy, get my commission, and served 2 tours afloat. And what was significant about those 2 tours afloat was back then, we all were required to go to sea. And you'll like that when my first ship had a helicopter attached occasionally, and I was a landing safety officer, so I used to have a lot of fun landing helicopters with talented people like you flying them.
well, we appreciate your service.
So that ship was very interesting in that no women had been assigned before.
What size boat was it?
A 210-foot cutter, so we call it a medium endurance cutter named the Resolute.
Mm-hmm.
And we sure had to live by the name to be on board because if we weren't resolute, it would be really hard to adjust to the climate on board was such that the 65 men, the majority of them, had not served with a woman before. So my roommate Annie and I were the first to be assigned in the history of that cutter.
What year was that?
Oh gosh, that would have been 1989.
Okay.
Not that we're dating ourselves, because I still feel like a 24-year-old. My brain says I'm 24. And so anyway, that was interesting because you weren't necessarily given classes on this is what you're going to find when you leave the confines of the factory, the academy, for 4 years, where you've learned to become a professional and competent person. And you go to a ship and you have to discover all over again that there's this whole other real world of how to deal with people that don't want you there. But thankfully, as I can say warmly and confidently throughout my career, there were always people in my midst who didn't look, think, or act like me and believed in me and were tremendous mentors who said, I believe in you, in so many words or actions, to help me figure out what I needed to do to qualify, to serve at the highest levels I could, and to continue to be a success in the field that I had chosen, which was starting out as a deck watch officer, maritime law enforcement boarding officer. So I had my gun on my hip and I was boarding vessels at sea. So that was the first tour. And then second tour followed on was I was honored to be selected to be the executive officer, which is second in command of a patrol boat, which was only 110 feet long with a crew of 16 men and the only woman on board. And that was interesting because now I had to figure out, again, I'm the only woman on board. The crew is smaller. You could turn around and somebody would notice, kind of thing. So you were always on your game, always someone that had to be a professional. And you always had these challenges come up and you were the disciplinarian, right, being second in command. So a woman disciplinarian, only woman on board. We found our way together. And I say that was probably one of my favorite assignments, was working with that crew of 16 men and my captain, and all the things that we accomplished so quickly because the pace of operations were so fast, was just tremendous. What a moment. What a tour.
And you did some pretty extraordinary things. Weren't you deployed overseas with the boat?
Well, not overseas, meaning Caribbean joint operations with other allied ships, things like that. Yes, so we did a lot of joint operations with other defenses, allied defense ships. We worked a lot of intelligence missions with regard to counter narcotics and drug running. We did immigration, where we were always trying to help humans, yes, Haitians and Cubans
Right.
who were trying to come to America on anything that could float, saving lives, saving turtles. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience where you really felt like you made a difference.
Where'd you go from there?
From there, with 5 days of training to be a media relations specialist and people that believed in me, and certainly I had learned on the grassroots level on my feet how to deal with press and media. So I had cultivated a team of people that believed in my capability, even though I had not been honored with the selection to go to grad school to get a whole, boost of training at a master's level in media relations. Off I went to do the job that it would normally take a master's and other types of training, intensive training, to become the district public affairs officer for the Seattle area, so the entire Pacific Northwest out of Seattle. And that was amazing.
Well, so that's kind of where we converge. So there's a lot of overlap in our experiences. I don't talk about that part of my career that much, but I enlisted when I was 18 in 1991. I served on a buoy tender first, the Gentian, which has long since been decommissioned, scraping barnacles off of buoys, and went to quartermaster A school. And then I served on the Seneca, a 270-foot cutter, kind of doing similar things in the Caribbean that you just described. And later in my career, that sort of interaction with the Haitian and Cubans was what inspired, me to want to study about those things. So my undergrad ended up being in international relations and political science to study basically the politics behind the policies that we were enforcing. So, law enforcement officer with a gun, I wasn't a boarding officer. I was a boarding team member following people like you, young ensigns and lieutenants, onto the backs of ships to do inspections. So much respect from there. And then this public affairs thing, that's where I think we met, probably was in Seattle, because I was stationed at Port Angeles as a junior officer, a brand new baby ensign, before I got to go to flight school. So yeah, that's kind of how my stuff rolled. So where'd you go from there? Like I know you retired as an '06 from the reserves. So tell us all about that.
After Seattle, I moved to New York and was assigned to Activities New York, which became Sectors New York. And what was that called? It was surface operations. So essentially we helped work missions operationally from Staten Island, Fort Wadsworth, where we were stationed. And again, another incredible experience serving in New York and being a single mom at the time, living in Manhattan. And that's when I was needing to make the transition for the sake of myself and my young son to leave active duty, unfortunately, because I loved it, to become a reservist and work full time in Manhattan, where I landed a job in media relations at a tech boutique PR firm, and my client was IBM.
Wow.
So while it was boutique, it was pretty demanding, pretty high level working for IBM.
Yeah. And then I know you had a job that I coveted and that I applied for and went through a couple of rounds for interviews, but you were the commandant's speechwriter.
Oh, well, yeah. So during my time in New York, again, I go back to my days on the second patrol boat, or in the patrol boat back in Key West before Seattle, then New York. There were people, the service is small, right? So everyone knows of everyone, and especially if you are capable in media relations and other specialties. This is just my specialty, becoming a storyteller for the Coast Guard and spokeswoman. I still had people that believed in me and knew of me, and now I'm in New York, and one of those folks needed someone to meet now the Atlantic area commander, who was coming in post 9/11 to do an interview on a 110 in Manhattan, over there by Wall Street Terminal. And so this was before TSA set up all those barriers. So I was like, okay, I'll meet the Admiral. And this Admiral was named Admiral Thad Allen. So I figured out a way. I told the driver, okay, wait for me here, at the disembarkation point for passengers coming off planes. And he was flying in from either DC or somewhere down south. And I figured out how to get to the gate. And I'm in uniform, and the Admiral comes off the plane and is like, who's this? Why are you here? I'm like, well, Admiral, thought I'd meet you at the gate. And so off we went and just hit it right off, where we did this interview with Joan London for her show. And at one point, funny story, it's funny now, but it wasn't so funny then. Admiral Allen is got the big lights, the big spotlights on for the television crew, which had set up inside this 110 patrol boat, which is moored. And it's hot. It's August. It's probably 110 degrees inside the bridge. And these beacons of spotlights are blistering his face. His face is beet red, and he's sweating, and he's talking about 9/11 and the Coast Guard's reaction and response. Mm-hmm. And I thought, he knows what we did and we can be proud of it, but the look on his face of being red and sweating doesn't tell that story. So I said, cut. And Joan London is like, what? Who are you? With the dark, the eyes said it all. And I said, I'm sorry, but we need to take care of the Admiral sweating. Let's get some paper towels so we can, dab off and look presentable. So someone reaches down one deck and brings up the brown sandpaper. Remember, we used to have brown sand, not the downy soft. So we hand him the brown, not realizing it was so abrasive, and he's wiping his face. It's even redder. So of course I was like mortified, but the interview went on, everything went well. And I guess he appreciated all of that and my skills, and said, if ever you want a job in DC, let me know. So of course I said, well, I would love to work in DC. And when 1 or 2 years later, when he became the Commandant of the Coast Guard, he needed a press secretary on his staff. So it was quite incredible to be pulled on active duty being a reservist, because no one had ever, to my knowledge, been on a commandant's staff as an activated reservist. Yeah. To serve in that position with
so you were press secretary.
Press secretary.
Oh, I had that wrong. Okay.
Yeah. And the bookends were the Haitian earthquake. So I was on day 4 in DC, a new environment, a new staff, new job. And the Haitian earthquake just rattles everyone in the world. And we had to respond. Yeah. And then the back end of my assignment was the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Wow. So it was quite an experience serving with and for Admiral Thad Allen.
Well, it just sounds like it's all in very, very much in character for him. I mean, he was a hero for us for what he did after Katrina in New Orleans. He kind of took over rescue and recovery operations there and was an amazing and inspiring leader. And one of the things that he always said was that he wanted dogs that could hunt. And so describing the way that your initial interaction went with him, I'm sure that he saw you as a dog that could hunt. So
yes.
That's so cool.
What kind of dog I would be.
He said it in a very respectful way. It was definitely a compliment to be considered.
That's right. We might want to clarify that it was a compliment.
It is a compliment.
Yeah. Dog name.
Yeah. Well, so that's an incredible story. What an incredible career that you had. So how does that lead to you writing these books?
Wow. Well, I wrote So Others May Live, the Rescue Swimmer Aircrew collection, while I was in active duty. Actually, all my books, while I was still serving in the Coast Guard in some capacity. And when I arrived in Seattle to become the District Public Affairs Officer for the Pacific Northwest, one of the days I walked in the office and talked to our team. I'm like, Chief, what are you guys working on? And she described how they were working on a reenactment of a cave rescue where a Coast Guard helicopter flew partway into a cave to help pull the rescue swimmer out and the one survivor. I said, hold on, all stop. What? Run that by me again? Yes, a Coast Guard helicopter flew partway into a cave to help get the rescue swimmer out. And that rescue swimmer's name is Tristan Heaton. Tristan Heaton honored me, blessed me with his story. And he became the first chapter that I wrote, which helped build this book to become what it is. And by having someone like Tristan, who was now out of the Coast Guard because of all the traumas that he had endured being a part of this mission to save lives and to be the calm in chaos, to go into untrained, unknown environments that we had not trained for. We didn't know we'd have to fly partway into a cave. There were so many things that came from that, as you probably are aware of. The program and what our aviators are able to do has evolved over time because of situations that have required them to become more and more and more and do things in so many diverse ways. So Tristan was the start of the book, but I had to have support. I had to have people who believed in me, because these folks are humble heroes. They keep their distinguished flying crosses in shoeboxes under the bed. And for me, an officer, to ask an enlisted person, as well as the aircrew, which are officers and other enlisted, for a moment where they nearly died, why would they want to talk to an officer? Why would they want to talk to a woman? Most of them are men. Right. About a moment where they nearly died. Mm-hmm. And that took people that believed that I could do this in a way that would honor them and be something they are proud of. And because of them, I was able to become their storyteller for a book that they are proud of, and they will sign on page 39 if their name is mentioned, or if they get a whole chapter, they sign at the chapter opening, because they are proud of this collection, which is a tribute to their work.
It's incredible. And before you move on to the other ones, I just want to have a couple of things to say about that. So I, like you, so much later, we find treasures in our books sometimes when we pull them back off the shelves. And I found one in my book, So Others May Live, my copy. And I flipped through it, and right here on chapter 4, the first, and we'll talk about the featured rescue swimmer in that chapter in a bit. But I was writing an article about the women who had served as, now we call them aviation survival technicians. And the one that you feature in this book had been long gone, long retired from the Coast Guard by the time I got to this. But I had this little note in my book, and it's from when I was in the office at Joint Interagency Task Force South, and it's written on this old-fashioned phone calls. While you were out, you got a phone call from Master Chief Clay Hill, who I was interviewing for that article about the 3 women who were still on active duty. So I just thought that was fun. And speaking of like trying to, I already knew one of the swimmers pretty well, and she trusted me. But I was in 05 at the time, calling enlisted women and asking them to trust me enough to tell their stories. And one of them was a real challenge, but she came around and we ended up being friends. So, the enlisted folks in the Coast Guard just want to be recognized. They're just doing their job and want to be respected for that, and they don't want a lot of glory, no matter how heroic their actions. So that is a fabulous book. And so tell us about the next book, which is Changing the Rules of Engagement.
So my second book, called Changing the Rules of Engagement, Inspiring Stories of Courage and Leadership from Women in the Military, all U.S. services, was inspired by a speaking event, a panel discussion for my first book. So writing these books, I'd never dreamed of becoming a speaker. It was just not even a thought. And once my first book came out about the aviation rescues, So Others May Live, I started to get these requests to talk about the book and talk about your career and talk about these amazing people that you've written about. And so when I was in DC at Women in Service for America Memorial in Arlington, if you haven't been there, it's very much worth going to. I was on a panel, and right before the panel was to begin, they said, we're moving down to this other room down the hall. So I gathered my things and started walking down the hall. And I got there before others did, and I had a moment, probably about 5 minutes, to look around the room, which was darkened. They hadn't turned up the lights yet, and there was all this memorabilia. And I was struck by it, and I went over to this podium that had a notebook with about 3 inches of papers inside. So I opened it up, and obviously it was important because it was in a place of prominence in the room. And I start flipping through, and I'm reading on each page is about 2 inches, single space, a bio of a woman who had died in Iraq or Afghanistan serving her country. And it just broke my heart. And I was getting teary-eyed thinking, as I went from page to page, another woman, and looking at how old they were. They weren't old, looking at how young they were. And I realized in that moment that they hadn't had a chance to get wrinkles like me now. They hadn't had a chance to have children if they wanted to do that, or probably get married or have a partner to achieve some of their dreams. They had died so young serving their country. And I immediately thought, all right, I need to write a book about women who have served in the modern era. And I thought it would be a book about women who had died. And then coming back home and talking with people, they said, really, no one wants to read a book about women who have died. How about a book about women that are living and have made a difference? So that's how I started this book. And I don't remember who my first interview was, but I was wanting to celebrate even more so women who have served, because when I looked at the books that were out there, and this was only 14 years ago when this book came out, women were footnotes in other books about men who have served. And it's still kind of that way. There's certainly women have come out with their own books now about their specific battle or journey, which is wonderful. But for the most part, I'm trying to remember the gentleman that really got me mad, because Ollie North, that's what it was. Ollie North had all these books out, right? I can't remember his series. And I would flip through some of his books, and even in World War II, he just had a footnote about women that X number had served. And I'm like, this is not right. How dare you not even have a chapter about women? So that really got me going. And the fact that we have such amazing women serving, I wanted to bottle up what I could as a representation of our amazing women who serve in all of our military services and services around the world. When you think about it, there are women doing amazing things. So this collection, in summary, is about the women who paved the way for the rest of us. And they helped change the culture of the military. And they prove that gender doesn't matter. And I learned so much from each and every one of them that they inspired me to do a couple things. And if you have time, we can talk about that.
Well, we will for sure. And then you talked about the inception of the idea for Old Glory. And I'm going to put you on the spot in a little bit before we wrap things up and ask you to read that poem. But we're going to save that for later. Let's talk about our girl in So Others May Live. Let's start with her. Kelly Mogk, then Kelly Larsen. So she was our first qualified female rescue swimmer. We're going to use that term. Is that what the term that you used to describe her?
Yes.
Were they aviation survivalmen yet?
What were they? They were ASMs, aviation survivalmen. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Kelly and how you put that story together and why you chose to write about her.
Yes. And first, in tribute to her, her title of her chapter is First, F-I-R-S-T. And each person that was a feature for a chapter, I asked them for a quote that meant something to them. And her quote, I'll read. What gave me my determination was everybody telling me I was going to fail. But mostly, I wanted to be a rescue swimmer, the frontline person in a rescue. So I think that really stamps what it is that she wanted and how she managed the battles to become one of, as I understand it, I think only 6 women to have ever become this rate and this specialty in the United States Coast Guard. There's still only 6.
Yeah. So, and we're actually right now we don't have the Coast Guard doesn't have any who are actively serving. They've all retired and moved on. One of the things that I think that you mentioned in the book that I always was very proud of, and I'm sure you were too, was being part of an organization that did not limit women in any way. And this specialty in the Coast Guard is the most physically demanding. Mm-hmm. The requirements just to even get into the training for it are similar to any of the special forces. Mm-hmm. So that whole upper body strength thing, the requirements, you just had to meet the same requirements as the men and get through the training just like they did. And she was the first one to do it.
Yes. Yeah. And kudos to our program for not changing the requirements and making sure people that graduate from this grueling program meet the standards. Yeah. And so I applaud that. And I think now, or I know so now, I don't know if I remember the exact name of the program, for men and women wanting to become rescue swimmers, they're setting them up earlier to partner with people so they have a better idea of what they need to do to qualify.
Yeah, that has been a program that's been off and on over the years, and there have been a lot of changes, I think, in recent years, because I think the school has moved. They had some problems with the pool, which was formerly in Elizabeth City. So I'm not sure where the program is. I'm not an expert. I'm not in the Coast Guard anymore. But you're right. They had basically they called it an airman program where they would bring, junior members, enlisted members who were interested in being aviation survival technicians, at least when I was actively flying, and they would come and train with the swimmers to prepare them. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kelly, as you have said, Liz, was the first woman to qualify as a rescue swimmer of any of the armed services, U.S. Armed Services, and the first for the Coast Guard. And so on the day that I feature her story, her rescue, obviously she had many, but this was the one that was included as chapter 4 in my book. This was a day that she agreed to jump into the Pacific Ocean 35 miles offshore from a helicopter. And so, of course, she dons her mask, fins, and snorkel. She had a dry suit on and waited for that moment to deploy. And it was January of 1989. Imagine how cold the Pacific Ocean is any time of the year, especially January.
Yeah.
So as the helicopter hovered, and you probably have better ideas of how to specifically say this, I'm just going to shoot from the hip as a non-aviator. She could see from the helicopter the F-4 pilot. And this was a second lieutenant in the Oregon National Guard. And he was struggling to keep his head above the surface. He couldn't even understand that there was a helicopter circling or that a rescue swimmer was observing him. He was entangled in his parachute. And as he was trying to keep his head above water, 20-foot waves washed over him. And the helicopter was hovering about 15 feet above the surface. And she was excited to go. She deployed, and in one swift movement, with full confidence and determination, she did a free fall as she's trained to do into the water. And being a strong swimmer, she was able to get over there. And she was briefed on the situation because the survivor didn't look like he was in great shape. And she knew that the plane had ditched, and therefore there should be 2 pilots. They only saw the one. And she also knew, as they are trained to do, that hypothermia was probably setting in. and had lowered his body core temperature. So he didn't have long to live. And I'll just read, if you want, I can read a little quote about what she said.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. Kelly said, I noticed he was taking a pounding from the waves crashing over the top of him. He probably sucked in a lot of seawater. He didn't have a helmet on. I didn't feel the cold temperature of the water. My adrenaline had kicked in. And she did have a rip in the side of her suit, but she didn't feel that either as the water started to seep into her suit. And she was getting cold. She said, nothing else matters. I didn't care about myself. I wasn't consciously aware of potential danger to myself. All you care about is getting that person out of the water. You're just so focused. So she found the inner strength to pull through what was a pretty dramatic rescue, because he was so entangled. And imagine all the lines of a parachute. And if you cut one, it could be the wrong one. It could start, having the chute sink even lower and pull him down with it, which was not what she wanted. So it was kind of like, right now I'm likening it to an EOD person trying to cut the right wire so the bomb doesn't explode. Well, here she is in the water trying to cut the right line so the man doesn't disappear from her grasp or take her with him with the tangle of the suit, the parachute. So let's see. There was a section that I don't have that page pulled, but his parachute was fully ballooned in the depths beneath him, and the weight of it was pulling his body downward to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. He had suffered multiple bone-crushing injuries ejecting from the cockpit, so he was not much help to himself or to her. And even at an altitude of 20,000 feet and a velocity of 500 miles per hour, ejection was better than the only alternative, not ejecting from his fighter jet. And that's what he said when I interviewed him. He said it was a lot of open wind blasts and some tumbling, following by having the parachute open. I started descending through the undercast of clouds. He collided with the surface, and it felt like concrete. He could have landed on a city sidewalk. It was all he could do to hang on to the life raft attached to a 10-foot cord extending from his chute. Presumably, he would have jumped into it. But, he said, when I spoke with him, if your arms are broken, you can't. He also had a broken leg. I was only able to partially inflate one of the life vests. You're supposed to pull vigorously but with both broken arms, I pulled a little. He couldn't talk on the radio to the second F4, which was circling above the clouds, or to his weapons system officer who had ejected from the rear seat a fraction of a second before him. And he wondered, where was Baker? What had become of him? So the long and the short of it is she was able to somehow find the right line and make the right cuts and get him into the life raft. And then once they recovered him, and she only did so by diving below the surface. And she saw that his leg was disjointed and knew it was broken, and he was slightly coherent. He followed her with his eyes. They were not alert eyes, only eyes aware of her presence. And she tried to say, or she told me, she said to him, hey, I'm here. I'm going to take this parachute off you. Bear with me. And he couldn't respond. There was a lot of coughing and gurgling, she said. She squeezed his hand, and miraculously, he squeezed back. So through this ordeal, she wasn't even thinking about if there were predators in the sea, like a shark, or what could possibly go wrong. She focused on getting him free, and he was a huge guy, over 6 feet and over 200 pounds. He was not easily placed into the rescue basket or would not be. And they decided not to use the basket and instead hoist him by using a rescue sling or a horse collar looped under his armpits attached to the hoist cable. So it took 25 minutes to rescue him. And then she gave a thumbs up sign signaling that he was ready for pickup, and up he went. and he was basically severely hypothermic. He was close to death from his body temperature dropping very low, and they needed to warm him up.
And then, so the air crew took him to shore and left her on scene. So she had to wait for another aircraft that was airborne and was in the area. But I know that she recalled that it felt like forever for them to come and pick her up. And meanwhile, all of this time, she's taking on water in her suit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, she bobbed in the ocean waiting for pickup herself.
Yeah.
And it felt very lonely and a sense of loss to see her helicopter fly away. But that was the right decision, she said. She agrees with that decision. And even 3 minutes to wait would not have been good for the survivor. Yeah. And she did start to relax knowing her job was done, and she hoped the pilot would be okay. And she couldn't see the helicopter coming because of the height of the waves. It seemed like it took an hour for them to arrive, she says. And then she started to feel the chill of the ocean because she had a leak in her suit that was letting that cold water in. And then she decided, wondering if there were critters out there. And she said, I wasn't going to look down anymore. She's not looking to see what's around her. But so she got picked up, and she got jarred because of the brunt of a little drop. And sounds like you remember most of this rescue too. What else did you think was significant?
No, I mean, you've hit the highlights. Yeah. So this was an incident that very strangely, and you highlight this in the book, very strangely, she received a lot of criticism for this because she had a tear in her suit and took on water. I don't really understand the criticism that went around for this. She was also obviously held up as a heroine, which, like we've talked about, they want to be thanked, but that's about it. They don't want to be paraded around, as the subject of public affairs events and that kind of thing. And I know that probably rubbed her the wrong way, but miraculously she stuck with the Coast Guard and ended up becoming an officer and a helicopter pilot later, which is amazing. And I never had the pleasure of meeting her or working with her, but her reputation definitely stuck around because I was stationed up there in the Pacific Northwest where she had flown. Yes. And so people knew her, and I never heard an ill word about her as a pilot. And just, I don't understand what the criticism was over the case, because it sounds to me like she did a fabulous job.
Yes.
And thank you. And I think honestly, part of, the great thing about you writing this story is that hopefully it sets the record straight for everyone.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that was my goal too, is to not to over embellish or and I don't criticize anyone. I just see everyone that I put in my book as legends that were recognized by their colleagues, which what better praise can you get if your own teammates or your own community says, you're worthy, you're heroic, you're extraordinary. And
we'll just put a little extra oomph on that in the rescue swimmer world, because she was a woman.
Yes. And it's not easy being first for whatever.
It's its own special little culture, and all of the respect to them, because I was their taxi driver, and I also did we called it the duck training. So I got in the water when I was an ensign at Port Angeles. I would get in the water to be basically like their victim in a Gumby suit and float around in the Straits of Juan de Fuca, where, as you know, there are many marine mammals. And I was terrified. Yes. I could never do that job.
Because they make you wait out there for a little while.
Yeah. I mean, the helicopter, the aircraft backs up so that they can get ready for get the cabin ready and everything. And you're like, come back, please hurry. So you can only imagine what it's like when you're in a survival situation. And we roll up with this beautiful orange helicopter. And then it takes us like 5 minutes to get everything organized to pick you up. I'm sure that feels like an eternity for those victims and for the swimmers who are out there in the water. That's a great story, as are the rest of the stories. If anybody is interested in knowing more about Coast Guard operations, that's a really great book to read. And then also my article about the other ASTs who were serving on active duty and in 2014 timeframe. That article is posted on the Literary Aviatrix website in my blog, so you can go back and read that.
Great story, and thank you for highlighting my book back then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course, I couldn't not. Absolutely. And so in this other book, Changing the Rules of Engagement, we'll just go briefly through several, because you have a lot of really awesome women. And let me know if I miss any. I'm putting my glasses on. I know that that's going to be terrible for people who are watching, but here we are. So you start with Colonel Pam Melroy, who frankly I had forgotten about. And she was an Air Force pilot, and then she was a space shuttle pilot and commander. So it sounds like Eileen Collins, as we know, was the first, and then there was one other. I can't remember her name. And then you highlight Pam. Do you want to talk about her?
Yes, what a wonderful person to get to know and be inspired by myself. And I was grateful to all these women in this book that offered their stories to me. They certainly didn't have to. So Pam Melroy worked for NASA before she retired. And her quote, which is chapter 1, she says, "Being an astronaut is soup to nuts, an amazing, wonderful, fabulous experience on every level." And the first word I use for her chapter is driven, period. And that's how Pam Ann Melroy, age 50, came to describe her career. And she achieved her dream of becoming an astronaut for NASA. And it took all that time to get to that point, her dream come true, for her to really understand that she was driven. She didn't think about that much on her way to her dream, her bigger dream. And she said, "It takes a long time to understand who you are relative to other people. As far as I'm concerned, I'm perfectly normal. I'm right in the middle of the road on everything, but obviously I'm not." And she laughed. So such an incredible person, who was one of only 3 women to fly and command the space shuttle. And her story is out of this world, as the chapter title says. And she offers such great insights to how she got there, some of the things she had to overcome. And she was often the first along the way, flying different kinds of jets to finally get to the place where she became an astronaut.
And then the next first, who everybody I'm sure knows about, who is all over social media sharing her story now. And you wrote this before. I think that she suffered from Lyme disease from a tick bite. But it's Lieutenant Colonel Nicole Malachowski, Lieutenant Colonel here. Anyway, in the book, she retired as a colonel, our first female Thunderbird performance pilot. And her story is incredible. We're still waiting for her to write her book.
Yes, that'd be great. Well, you can read about her story in my book.
That's what I was just about to say. But at least we have her story here to read. And she's incredible. And then another one that I absolutely admire and respect is Senator Tammy Duckworth. Was an Army Blackhawk pilot. Her aircraft was shut down, and she lost both of her legs, and
one of her arms.
And one of her arms, and then became a senator. She has since written her own story, but you do a really wonderful, concise job in this book. I remember of telling her incredible story and how,
yes. And she shared with me how she was in Iraq and what happened that day that her Blackhawk went down, and how she became an amputee, and how she woke up in the hospital. And she was so wonderful to share all the details, the excruciating pain she went through, and going forward from that, what pulled her through, how she pulled herself through, and how she came to achieve her dream. And that was first to be in Congress, and now she's a senator and married, and she has, I think, at least 2 children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was so sweet to write a thank you note to me when the book came out. And of course, I sent her her own copy, and she was delighted to see it in print. And so wonderful, wonderful sharing again of an amazing woman.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And she is pictured on the cover of her own book, which is Every Day is a Gift, in her wheelchair with her children, which is, very impactful, just even the image of that.
Yes.
Now, before we talk about my personal heroine, are there any other women in aviation? And just to be fair, you highlight a lot of wonderful leaders from other specialties as well in this book, both enlisted and officer, and their heroism and grit and determination. Am I missing any other women in aviation, though?
Not women in aviation, but I do want to give a shout out to the other women from the Marine Corps and the Navy who are in this book, and Army. So if you have interest in knowing more about the other services, these are, again, women who have changed my life by simply knowing so much about them in the space of a chapter. It's so cool to hear their lessons and to learn more about what they went through and how it can also be relatable to us.
That's right. And then let's talk about the one that I personally know, and that would be, she retired as Vice Commandant Vivien Crea. She was inducted into the Women in Aviation International Hall of Fame in 2010. We're very proud of her. I have, for those of you watching, a picture of her. In the Coast Guard, when you are is it the oldest or the longest standing? I can't remember. We have the Coast Guard Aviation Association, for whom I help manage some of their social media.
Ancient Order of Pterodactyls?
Yeah, so it is the Ancient Order of the Pterodactyl was the name of it for a very long time. It is the Coast Guard Aviation Association now, and I help with their Instagram. But so Admiral Crea in this picture is in her garb. So the oldest active duty officer and enlisted get to be the ancient albatross. Yes. Yes. It's different for the enlisted folks. So she's in her ancient albatross garb, which is an old-fashioned flying cap, leather flying cap, and a fur-lined leather jacket. She's got like this big fur collar on it. And she was adorable because she stuck an earring, a C-130 earring, in the side of the cap. And that's what she wore when she was out and about representing. And it's to me because I was the detailer at the time when she was the Vice Commandant, and she said, "Liz, take good care of our aviators. Vivien Crea, Ancient Albatross, AA number 21."
Oh, how special. I love her picture there too. She looks great.
Yeah, she does. Of course she does. Well, tell me about what you know about her.
Oh, wow. There's just so much to be said. I'll just start with the title of her chapter in my book is Her Wings Broke the Glass Ceiling. And this quote I pulled from her is, "From the beginning, I couldn't accept no for an answer." And that says a lot. Think about that.
Yeah.
Couldn't accept no for an answer. And that's how she petitioned and found support for and maneuvered and helped negotiate and motivate opening the aviation community in the United States Coast Guard for women to also fly planes, because there was no legitimate reason why women couldn't fly planes. At the time, we weren't allowed to be at sea on ships or fly planes. And sure, you could say, well, on a ship at that time, there weren't berthing or separate facilities for women on ships, but in planes, that didn't hold water. So that was part of the justification. And thankfully, we had a commandant at the time, Admiral Gracie, who recognized that the workforce was 51% women. So why not have more women doing more things? And that's what I love about the Coast Guard, is that we've always found a way to be inclusive, and genders don't matter. So she helped motivate that. And while she wasn't the first, because she was tied up in the Marine safety and security inspection community, she was the second, I believe. You may recall more.
Yeah, no, she is the second Coast Guard woman to attend Navy flight training. Yeah.
And then she says, I asked her, and I thought a lot about this. I wondered while I was writing her story, and I did meet, and she granted me an interview in her office in Washington, D.C. when she was Vice Commandant. And I wondered, was she gifted with brilliance to have excelled further than any other woman in the Coast Guard and of all other military services to be in this position? No other woman had achieved that in any of the U.S. services. And she said, I don't think I'm super smart. I think every person can put up his or her own barriers to the extent that it creates a glass ceiling.
That is true. There are also external barriers, but she did manage with great professionalism and the respect of her peers and all of us who were subordinate to her. She obviously achieved things that nobody else had done, and she was the first of many, many things for us in the Coast Guard, and a role model to look up to.
One of the other things that I'd like to recognize about how amazing Vice Admiral Crea is that when I asked her if I could interview her for this book, and I described what I was doing, and she said yes, and we arranged for me to meet her in her office in DC. And you can tell a lot about a leader, about how the body positioning is and how they set things up. So, of course, I was extremely nervous coming in to interview this amazing leader and highly ranked person. And in her office, a beautiful suite, like a 2-bedroom condo kind of thing, all one floor. She had many choices of where to sit, behind her desk or behind a couch with a coffee table or at a chair. So she chose to have us sit in the couch chair section, whereby it was an open conversation. There wasn't a desk between us. There wasn't a barrier. And so that was very symbolic to me. And then one of the first things she said, which she says a lot throughout her career and probably part of her success, was she asked me, Martha, what is it that you need from me today to be successful?
Nice.
And if you think about that, I in turn that's one of the things I've learned that I tried to impart when I was still serving in the Coast Guard, and even now in other things that I'm doing, is asking people, what is it that you need from me? How can I help you be successful? So you're not wasting time. You're going right to the bottom line of what does this person need to achieve their goal, their dream. And in my case now, I talk about achieving your bigger dream by being bold, by being first and being yourself. And I can break that down with stories like the ones that we've been talking about on how to be bold, how to be first, how to be yourself. And then it creates a culture of empowerment. And with empowerment, you can live and realize your bigger dream. Let's not settle for dream. Let's go for bigger dream.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it's going to be hard to wrap things up with you because I have so many questions and so many things I would really love to talk about. So let's just try and be brief about these just so that I can get them out. So how did you publish these books?
I traditionally published.
Okay.
I went to traditional publishers. I found houses that would take a military story or collection and an author like me with my first book was no agent. My second book was an agent. And my third book was back with my original publishing house. So it was a lot of hard work. It's a business, finding a publisher. And I was glad that I did it the way I did it, through traditional publishing, not self-publishing.
Okay, that's fair, especially for the time. Things have changed significantly over the past maybe 10 years, but no, I can totally see that being the best way, especially with your life the way that it was, to go traditional publishing. And so, what are you working on anything now that you want to share?
I'll share a little bit. I am the end of this month. Next week I have a keynote, so I'm still speaking and using my books, the collections of stories, to help inspire audiences, along with my own story, to be bold, be first, and be themselves. And this is how we can be empowered and achieve our bigger dream. And then at the end of the month, I'll head to New York, where I'm going to Thriller Fest, where I'm pitching my first novel. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I will find an agent or a publisher that would like to publish a military suspense story, which is inspired by a true story of amazing, extraordinary heroes who have served in the United States Coast Guard. And because I wrote it as a novel, I could add in some romance, some other drama, and it's a fast-paced cinematic read, I'm told.
Well, I can't wait for that and to have that interview with you when that comes out. And so, you mentioned that you are a keynote speaker, but you also have a little side gig that I find fascinating. Tell us briefly about that.
Yes, my hobby. In fact, I just got back from Scotland, Ireland, France, and a little bit of Spain and Portugal.
Jealous.
Driving Zodiacs. So if you think about Navy SEALs, they drive these high-powered, multiple-engine, 20-foot rigid hull inflatable pontoon boats with an outboard. Well, I don't have the high-powered. I have one engine, and I work for an ultra-luxury cruise line called Seabourn, where their expedition ships are geared up for expedition. And we take guests out on I would be driving one of the 24 Zodiacs that we launch down from deck 9. We receive guests on board. We take off to go to islands and bird rookeries and icebergs and glaciers. And I've been able to do this around the world and give lectures on board, conversations on board. So it's the combination of all my passions: travel, storytelling, being in the water and nature, and my soul is filled by the magnificence of this world that I hope we can do more to preserve and protect.
Unbelievable. And the irony of the Coast Guard, retired Coast Guard captain, who is now the small boat coxswain.
Yes.
Which would be
coxswain. And one of the funny things about that was when my first contract was in Alaska. And so you introduce yourself when the new guests come on board. And I always say I'm Captain Martha LaGuardia-Kotite, retired United States Coast Guard after serving so many years. And then everybody wants to be on your Zodiac, right? Because they've probably never been on a Zodiac before. So they all line up. They're like, I want to be with Captain Martha. And then a couple of times they'll get on board. And it was my first contract, right? My first couple of days doing this. And one of the gals says, so Martha, how long have you been doing this? Because we're going to approach a glacier. I'm like, this is my first day. And they're like, can we go back to the ship? No one ever asked to be back to the ship. And I've brought everyone back to the ship safely.
Good job.
We've had a great time.
It sounds like a dream job. It's incredible and inspiring in its own way. So I love that you figured that out. Well, before we wrap up, do you think we could have time to read the Old Glory story, the poem that we do at the end of our ceremonies? I didn't do one myself. I wanted to keep mine kind of low key, but I do get teary every time I witness.
I was going to say, you're going to have me get tearied on you.
The flag getting passed at a retirement. So let's hear it.
So My Name is Old Glory is by Howard Schnabber. This is the poem at the front end of my book. I am the flag of the United States of America. My name is Old Glory. I fly atop the world's tallest buildings. I stand watch in America's halls of justice. I fly majestically over great institutes of learning. I stand guard with the greatest military power in the world. Look up and see me. I stand for peace, honor, truth, and justice. I stand for freedom. I am confident. I am arrogant. I am proud. When I am flown with my fellow banners, my head is a little higher, my colors a little truer. I bow to no one. I am recognized all over the world. I am worshiped. I am saluted. I am respected. I am revered. I am loved and I am feared. I have fought every battle of every war for more than 200 years. Gettysburg, Shiloh, San Juan Hill, the trenches of France, Rome, the beaches of Normandy, the deserts of Africa, and more. And a score of places long forgotten by all but those who were with me. I was there. I led my soldiers. I followed them. I watched over them. They loved me. I was on a small hill in Iwo Jima. I was dirty, battle worn, and tired. But my soldiers cheered me, and I was proud. I have been soiled, burned, torn, trampled on the streets of countries I have helped set free. It does not hurt, for I am invincible. I have been soiled, burned, torn, and trampled on the streets of my country, and when it is by those with whom I have served in battle, it hurts.
I know, me too.
But I shall overcome, for I am strong. I have slipped the bonds of earth, and I stand watch over the uncharted new frontiers of space from my vantage point on the moon. I have been a silent witness to all of America's finest hours, but my finest hour comes when I am torn into strips to be used for bandages for my wounded comrades on the field of battle. When I fly at half-mast to honor my soldiers, and when I lie in the trembling arms of a grieving mother at the graveside of her fallen son, I am proud. My name is Old Glory. Dear God, long may I wave.
Woo-wee.
Woo-wee.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you couple that with the emotions of a retirement ceremony where you're honoring somebody who has served, and then you have like you described, the flag being passed from that person's beginning rank in the service all the way up to there's a person standing in for each rank,
Yes.
all the way up to their retirement rank. It's just a very emotional experience.
And they're wearing white gloves and they're doing a hand salute as the folded flag is passed from one to the other with an about face hand salute, about face hand salute. It's just, it was a tearjerker. And I thought, I've got to bottle this up into a book to illustrate the power and passion of our flag. If we take a moment to reflect on it and appreciate, God bless America.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, Martha, thank you so much for everything that you shared today and for all of the books that you've written so far. And we can't wait for the ones that come in the future.
Thank you, Liz. It's been tremendous to be here, and I'm grateful for every minute. Thank you again, and thanks to all that you do for others.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find Martha at her website, marthakotite.com, and on Instagram at mkotite. I'd like to thank Michael Wilds of Massif & Crew for his help in producing this interview and his support of all things literary aviatrix, blue skies, and happy reading.